What's going on, guys? In this video we're going to look over Cleanspark's mining update. We're also going to look over its chart. Sorry, I'm waiting for my batteries for my camera to charge, so you're likely not going to see me in this video, but I did want to give a quick update on Cleanspark and their mining update. For the month of November, Cleanspark mined 587 Bitcoin. They increased their contracted power by nearly 11% during that month. If you didn't know, they also reported their fiscal year 2025 earnings, with more than 766 million in revenue, and despite what AI has said, and I'll show you their mistake, they have announced the closing of their 1.15 billion convertible note offering. Now, as said by Matt Schultz, their CEO and co-founder, Cleanspark's progress this year reflects what's possible when a team believes in a shared mission. Last month, we expanded our contracted power to over 1.4 gigawatts, with an additional 125 megawatts in TVA's service territory, and had a successful closing of our $1.15 billion zero convertible note offering. Our team's focused on expanding Cleanspark's contracted power, yada yada yada. We're proud of fiscal 2025 and even more excited for the road ahead. Now, on November 13, Cleanspark announced the closing of their convertible offering, and in connection with this offering, they repurchased 30 million shares, which is about 10.9% of their outstanding commons, for $460 million. Although, no shares were repurchased from directors or officers. To be fair, they do have fantastic, my mind just completely drew a blank, but they have currently a milestone-based reward program for awarding CEOs and the like, other officers, with stock based on certain milestones that they hit. But it would be nice to see some added confidence with some purchasing from directors and officers. Now, the use of their remaining proceeds from this offering include expanding Cleanspark's power and land portfolio, developing data center infrastructure, and the repayment of outstanding Bitcoin-backed credit balances, and general corporate purposes. I recommend you guys listen to their earnings. I will leave it down below for you. Hopefully I'll remember. Now, we know their Bitcoin produced. Their peak single day Bitcoin production was 20.44, average production 19.5, almost 20 Bitcoin every day that they are producing or mining. And they have, in the year 2025, mined 7,124 Bitcoin. The year's not over yet. They'll reach maybe, what, 7,700, give or take. As for their hash rate, their operational hash rate is 50 exahash per second. Their average operating hash rate is 47.4 exahash per second. And their efficiency is a stunning 16.07 joules per terahash. One of the best and most efficient Bitcoin miners in the game. And one of my mottos with the Bitcoin miners is efficiency is key. I'm sure you guys have heard that before. Deployed fleet of 246,104 Bitcoin miners. Now, as for what Cleanspark is holding, they have 13,054 Bitcoin, and they sold 565 Bitcoin, so almost as much as they mined. I think this is smart that they are trimming, that they are using their Bitcoin rather than just sitting on it, rather than diluting shareholders more and more moving forwards. They've made $52 million from this Bitcoin, and their average price is $91,900 for their price sold. All right, now I went to TradingView and we had the little, bits of news from Cleanspark that they show, and here's one that's completely false. Key facts: Cleanspark plans a $1.15 billion note offering. These are key facts, guys? As I just showed you all, Cleanspark announced the closing of their, I misspelled that, $1.15 billion offering. AI will be the death of us all. But yeah, be careful with AI, guys. Be careful with any news source, even me. Double check my facts. Because the fact is, people will get it wrong, including me at times. But, in these latest updates, there it is. They plan a $1.15 billion offering. No. It would be nice if we didn't get that piece of news. Maybe that's causing people to be fearful. People that don't go to investor relations sites and read from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Or from the horse's book, I guess I would say. I don't know. Now, one thing we saw, even not just on the 1 hour, but on the 4 hour, a massive bullish divergence. RSI picking up from mid-November, basically, while price continues down. We knew a turnaround was coming, especially based on what Bitcoin was doing. Bitcoin was so heavily oversold, not as oversold as it's been since February, which was the last time we bottomed out and saw a massive rally, multi-month rally. We did see a beautiful bullish divergence on the 4 hour, on the 1 hour. Now, going over to the daily, you'll see that we bottomed out with this hammer candle. along with that bullish divergence, not on the daily, you don't see it here, but on the 4 hour, on the 1 hour, combined with this important support that was regained, this $10 support that I mentioned, which was a previous resistance, and we rallied once we were able to break out of it. We got a rally once we were able to break back over it. And now you can tell we're getting hung up by this 50 MA right here. It's kind of a gravitational push, or a magnetic, when two magnets go backwards from each other, something like that. Now I would like to see Cleanspark try to hold this $14 area, which has been a resistance or support in the past, kind of a resistance point that became, you know, a backwards magnet that pushed Cleanspark down. And it was a support at times until it broke, and you saw a big reaction on the downside after the break. I think this 14 will be important to hold, and if we can hold it, we're likely to test that 50 MA. We need to break roughly 16-ish, and then we can push onward and upward. Now, I did want to mention their earnings. They're anticipated to post a small profit. They reported a standardized loss, and they did see some nice revenue growth, which is typical of Cleanspark, 220 something million versus 198 million the quarter before. You know, the big thing though is profitability. We want to see these companies being profitable, taking money in, not burning cash. If they're burning cash, they're likely to dilute shareholders in the future. These Bitcoin miners are very tricky. They tend to be unprofitable at times, they tend to be profitable at times, depending on what Bitcoin does, and also depending on Bitcoin's unrealized gains or losses for the quarter. One thing to think about as well, this was the period that ends in September. Bitcoin topped out in October. One thing also to consider is since Bitcoin topped out in October, I don't know why I'm pointing at Cleanspark, but this is where Cleanspark topped out. You can figure that Bitcoin topped out there as well. Anyways, Bitcoin topped out in October and is lower than it was in the beginning of the quarter. If we can't finish the year off strong with higher prices than we started the quarter, the Bitcoin miners are likely to report an unrealized loss. And this is one reason why I'm kind of surprised that they're estimating a profit here. They're expecting a drop in revenue, surprisingly, which we don't see very often at all from quarter to quarter. But you know, they're guiding for a profit, which to me is kind of surprising, considering I would think that Bitcoin's gonna end up lower by the end of the quarter. They're gonna take an unrealized loss on their Bitcoin. And what's interesting also is a lot of the other Bitcoin miners are anticipating a loss for the quarter ending in December. So something to consider and ponder. Now looking at Bitcoin, it looks like it got hung up here at this $94,000 area. I was looking at this trend line on like smaller term time frames, and I was wondering why the heck is this here, and then I looked at the weekly and realized, oh yeah, it's a major support on the weekly. Broke the support and we saw a massive sell-off. Broke back above, we saw a continued run. We broke under it and saw a big reaction. You know, this 94,000 is clearly an important area. We need to break back over it. You know, one thing that you can use to kind of give you an idea of certain levels that Bitcoin might get hung up at, or Bitcoin needs to break out of, so on and so forth, is looking at larger term time frames. These could be major levels that need to be broken. I mean, when you look at this, let's go to like say the 4 hour, it doesn't look as important of a pattern. You're like, you know, yeah, maybe 94, but maybe other areas. You know, on the weekly, it shows it clearly at 94, roughly 94. So, you know, when you're unsure of kind of where a certain pattern might lie, you know, go to longer term time frames. I mean, look here, for example, on the monthly, this was an area of resistance. We broke it, saw a massive run, became a kind of a support point, a bouncing point, ran again. I just find it really interesting that, you know, this death cross so far has marked the bottom, which we have seen throughout this bull cycle, that every death cross we've gotten marked a bottom, marked a great opportunity to buy, and so far this was no different. Now, we did see that break of this descending resistance that we mentioned. We just need to break this 94. We're kind of in between 2 points. We need to break this 94 so we can go test the moving averages higher. And going to smaller term time frames, this does kind of look like a basic cup and handle, so maybe we can get that 94 break and continue higher. One thing that I wanted to mention that I haven't mentioned in a while, this 50 MA on the weekly, we need to reclaim this at roughly 102. If we can break this 94, I do believe we're going to test this 102. We need to break over it. If we find it as resistance, we're done, in my opinion, unless the market fakes us out, of course. But you can figure that if we break it and become resistance, we broke it, become resistance, we're continuing down. Look at the last cycle, we held it as a support until we didn't, and then that continues the downtrend. We held it as support until we didn't. We need to break back over this 50 MA on the weekly, in my opinion, at 102,007 currently, roughly. We need to break that. It's very important. If we find it as resistance, we're likely to retest lows. You know, this didn't just happen in 2021 where we found the 50 MA on the weekly as resistance. No, it also happened in the 2017 peak. 2017 peak, we came down, tested the 50 MA, broke under it, and it became a resistance. And we didn't recover until the next cycle, until 2020. One thing is the previous cycle, the 2013 peak, we did see the market kind of react on it. Once we broke it, we did continue a pretty heavy downtrend, continued it as resistance until we broke out. But here's what's interesting. Once it found it as resistance, I would say that was a buying opportunity, because within just a few months, we rallied and went on a massive uptrend and started our next cycle. So this 50 MA was found as resistance much later in the bear market. So it wasn't as useful here. I guess your indication was the break of the 50 MA in this cycle, and that rejection off the 50 MA on a test is, I guess, confirmation that we're continuing a little lower. But, you know, like I said, that's very important. We need Bitcoin to reclaim this 102. We used the 50 MA as a bouncing off point throughout this cycle. We also used those, you know, death crosses as a bouncing off point throughout this cycle. And if we can break the 50 MA on the weekly, we're also coming up and going over the 50 MA on the daily, which is at around 101,000. But let me know how you guys are feeling about Bitcoin. Let me know how you guys are feeling about Cleanspark. What do you think about AI? Will it be the death of us all with all this misinformation, or at least misinterpreted information, I guess you could say? It's crazy to think how much the world changes in only a matter of a few years. But anyways, thanks as always for watching, guys. I'll try to hit you with another video if my editing doesn't take too long. We'll talk about some Larry Fink news. We'll talk about what Jim Cramer thinks of the Fed and why we're not going to get a rate cut, even though probabilities have even increased more. And we, of course, got some bad job data. We'll talk about that in a future video. Thanks, as always, for watching, guys. If you made it this far, consider hitting the like, subscribe, ring the notification, and I will see you next time.